On March 14th, a temple kitchen in Varanasi that has fed 20,000 people every single day for 35 consecutive years, through droughts, through floods, through a global pandemic, ran out of gas and had to turn away 22,000 hungry people. It was the first closure in the temple's history. That same week, 450 out of 670 ceramic factories in Gujarat went dark. Restaurants across Mumbai, Delhi, Chennai, and Bengaluru started turning customers away. Signs appeared on storefronts across the country reading, "No roti today due to gas cylinder crisis." Most people think that wars in the Middle East affect petrol prices and airline tickets, a temporary inconvenience, something that shows up as a slightly higher number at the fuel pump and then fades away. The idea that a military conflict between the US, Israel, and Iran, happening thousands of kilometers away, could shut down temple kitchens, idle ceramic factories, and collapse a $60 billion restaurant industry in India feels like an exaggeration. It is not. What is happening in India right now is one of the clearest examples of how deeply connected the global economy is, and how quickly a single choke point can turn a foreign war into a domestic crisis, affecting hundreds of millions of ordinary people. The rupee has crashed to a record low of 94 to the dollar. Foreign investors have pulled $9.83 billion out of Indian financial markets in March alone. And a 35-year-old temple kitchen could not feed the poor. We are going to break down exactly how a war that India had no part in starting became an energy crisis on its doorstep. We will cover the Strait of Hormuz, India's dangerous dependency, the industries already collapsing, and why India is structurally worse positioned than almost any other major economy to weather this storm. Let's start with the trigger, because the chain of events that led to empty gas cylinders in Varanasi happened shockingly fast. A line of men in aprons stands outside the Varanasi temple, arms folded, eyes on the empty gas cylinders stacked by the gate. For the first time in decades, the kitchen's giant cauldrons are cold. In Mumbai and Chennai, restaurant owners cross names off waiting lists, turning away families who have never cooked a meal at home. The signs on their doors are blunt: no gas, no food. In Morbi, the sound of ceramic kilns has faded to silence. Thousands of workers, potters, loaders, drivers, gather at tea stalls, waiting for news that may never come. In the alleys behind closed factories, day laborers count their rupees and wonder how long they can last. This is not a story of distant headlines. It is a story of kitchens that cannot cook, factories that cannot run, and families who cannot eat. The crisis is not theoretical. It is here, and it is everywhere. On February 28, 2026, airstrikes lit up the night sky over Iran. Within hours, Iranian missiles struck back, and the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow channel moving 1/5 of the world's oil, was sealed. Tankers carrying India's fuel sat stranded, insurance costs soared, and shipping routes twisted thousands of miles off course. Then, on March 5th, drones slammed into Qatar's Ras Laffan gas complex, knocking out a key processing unit and cutting liquefied natural gas output by over 1 million tons. 3 days later, Qatar Energy declared force majeure, warning buyers across Asia that deliveries would be delayed or cancelled. In less than 10 days, a distant conflict had slammed shut the arteries feeding India's kitchens, factories, and power plants. India's energy lifeline is a patchwork of tankers, pipelines, and terminals that stretch thousands of kilometers from foreign ports to local kitchens. Nearly 88% of India's crude oil is imported. For LPG, the fuel that powers most urban stoves and temple kitchens, about 60% comes from abroad, and 90% of those shipments must pass through the Strait of Hormuz. The numbers from the Ministry of Petroleum are blunt. Strategic reserves hold just 6.5 million barrels of crude, enough for only 75 days. and gas reserves cover barely a month. The Dahej terminal alone handles the bulk of LNG imports, making it a single point of failure. When the Gulf supply lines snap, there is little cushion, just a thin buffer separating daily life from disaster. Brent crude oil shot past $84 a barrel. Asian liquefied natural gas contracts jumped to $13.5 per million British thermal units. The price of a basic LPG cylinder rose by 15 rupees per kilogram in a single week. For families and small businesses, the math is brutal. Gas for cooking, heating, and running machines now costs more than at any point in recent memory. The rupee tumbled to 94 rupees to the dollar, pushing up the price of every imported good. Foreign investors pulled $9.83 billion out of Indian markets in March alone, spooked by the volatility. Every jump in global benchmarks feeds straight into household budgets and government deficits. The panic on trading screens turns into pain at the checkout counter. Cargo traffic through the main shipping lanes fell by 78% almost overnight. Tankers that once moved straight from the Gulf now faced a detour of 2,200 nautical miles around Africa, adding 12 days to every voyage. Each LNG ship cost an extra $1.8 million just in war risk insurance, with premiums jumping 15 to 25%. At the ports, dockside workers stood idle as fewer ships arrived. In Morbi, Gujarat, the heart of India's ceramic industry, factory gates stayed locked. By March 19th, more than 550 of the region's 670 tile factories had gone dark. Kilns that once burned day and night now sat cold. Managers stared at propane invoices that had doubled, unable to fill orders or pay workers. Rolling mills and aluminium plants slashed output, their lines starved of fuel. The bottleneck at sea had turned into a blackout on the ground. India's energy planners scrambled for alternatives as tankers waited offshore and factories fell quiet. Officials rerouted 70% of crude imports outside the Gulf, turning to ports in Africa, Russia, and the United States. Each new contract meant higher costs and longer journeys. Meanwhile, Japan and South Korea drew on reserves lasting half a year or more. India's buffer, just 75 days for oil and barely a month for gas, offered little protection. Wealthier nations locked in cargoes at prices India could not match. Inside the Ministry of Petroleum, spokespeople announced a 25% jump in domestic LPG output, pushing refineries to their limits. Two emergency deals brought in 2.2 million tons of LPG from the United States and another 176,000 tons from Norway. But these shipments only softened the blow. The Reserve Bank governor made a rare public statement, signaling readiness to defend the rupee, while warning that energy-driven inflation would stretch every tool they had. Price caps and rationing slowed the bleeding, but lines for cylinders and layoffs at factories made clear the pain was far from over. Every measure bought time, not relief. For millions, the fixes felt like a thin patch on a widening crack. Today, a distant war empties kitchens, shutters factories, and fuels runaway prices in India. When global supply chains snap, it isn't just energy that runs out, it's security, jobs, and hope.